Hi everybody, and welcome to the Sunday Night Indigenous Sex and Love Show. I'm Edward Sear, and this is...
I'm Lauren.
And then we have to our far left here...
I'm Denise Booth.
And so Denise Booth is coming in today. And Denise, where do you work?
I work for a place called the Toronto Birth Center, but I'm also a part of a collective, a doula collective, a full spectrum doula collective called Edward.
Hey, so we wanted to bring Denise in today to answer your questions from the community and go through pregnancy and birth control. And it's such an important topic. What do you think, Lauren?
Pregnancy should be very important to everyone. It's part of life.
Absolutely, it's part of life. And so we wanted to bring Denise in. And the first thing we want to go through with Denise is, for our little viewers out there who might be watching this, how does pregnancy occur?
How does pregnancy occur? So I'm going to start off by talking about a few things that might be a bit sensitive. So parental discretion advised. And also I would like to just make this full claim that I am not a clinician, which means I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a midwife. I'm a doula that works with midwives and birth workers in the community. So I have some knowledge. It's not all the knowledge. Absolutely. And if you have further questions, you should go talk to a doctor or even midwives. There's amazing midwives in the city. So talk to midwives in the city.
And just to amplify what's already been said, myself and Lauren LaValle are not sexual health experts. We're merely people working in the social service field who want to do our part to raise sexual health awareness, especially with recent funding cuts to sexual health programming.
It's a really important topic, and everyone should have the proper facts on how pregnancy occurs and the proper names of our body parts, because it's really important to know what the proper names of our body parts are.
Right on. Let's get right into it, Denise.
So I'm going to start with a uterus. So this is a uterus.
Okay.
It's very pretty. This isn't what a real uterus looks like, just for viewers at home. Our uteruses don't have moons in them.
Okay. So
it's just a very pretty one.
What do you think about that, Lauren?
It's very helpful to know what it looks like.
Perfect, thank you.
So this middle part where the moon is called our uterus. And so they're usually called the female reproductive parts, but some people who don't identify as women also have uteruses. So we're going to try not to gender this stuff. So this is a uterus. These two white things are called ovary or ovaries or ovary. And then this part that connects the ovary to the uterus is called the fallopian tube. And so the ovaries, they hold ovum or eggs. They call, and that's one part of making a baby. And so the ovum or egg lives in our ovaries. And once a month, or once every 28 days is a sort of what clinicians call a regular cycle. So once every 28 days, there's an egg that gets released from your ovary, and it travels all the way down your fallopian tube into your uterus. And if there's not a sperm to fertilize the egg, then what happens is the lining of your uterus that sort of builds up throughout your cycle sheds along with the ovum or the egg.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And so this part where the lovely little flower is called, that is actually called the vagina. I have another picture of female reproductive parts. And so we call all of this our vagina. But in reality, what it's actually called is a vulva. So the part that the baby comes out of, birth canal, some people will call it, is actually called the vagina. And this part, the external female reproductive organs, is called a vulva. Just so we know.
Just so we have the correct terminology and stuff like that.
Just so we all know where everything is and what everything's called. This is called a vulva.
Perfect.
So, female reproductive organs, uterus, fallopian tubes, ovary, and then the part, I forgot about a part. I forgot about a very important part. So this is the uterus, as we said, and then this is the vagina or the birth canal. But this part right here, in between these two, is called the cervix. And so acts as sort of like a wall that protects your uterus, so it's not just sort of open. So that's that. And then this tiny little picture is of the male reproductive system. So it looks a little bit different. So
perhaps the camera person can zoom in if we could get that.
Yep, extreme close up.
Perfect.
So we all know that this is called the penis, and then the things underneath, some people call them balls, but we're gonna call them testes or testicles.
Yeah, testicles.
Testicles or testes. And then there is, and so in your testicles, people with penises and testes, they produce sperm. And so the sperm will go through the vas deferens and out through
the penis hole.
The penis hole, or
the urethra.
The urethra.
Also known as the urethra.
We're not going to call it a penis hole. We're going to call it a urethra.
I just wanted to make sure we have layman terms for those of you viewers who do not know
the penis hole. The actual proper term is called the urethra.
Yes.
And we can say the words, right?
Yes, urethra.
Urethra, vulva, vagina.
Can you say one of those words, Lauren?
Vagina and penis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. What a great participation.
Thanks, Lauren. So, where is, I have all these beautiful,
oh, what is that?
So this is a sperm. So this gets made in the testes, and this is an egg or an ovum, and this, so people with ovaries and fallopian tubes and uteruses, they don't make ovum or eggs every month like men do. People with penises do. So female reproductive organs, when a woman, I'm very sorry for the cisgendered language right now, when a female person is born, they are born with all the eggs that they will ever have in their entire life, so they don't replenish the supply like men do. And so the spermatozoid meets the ovum, and that is how
fertilization happens?
Fertilization
happens. So once the sperm gets to the egg, that's where that magic happens. That's where the two entities meet each other and become that is a baby.
And so this sperm meets this egg, they meet, and if the sperm gets into the egg, then the egg, if it's fertilized, will implant itself in the lining of the uterus. And
so that's where the baby will be stored.
In the uterus, uterus, yes. The baby will be stored in the uterus. Is there any other questions? I think that was...
Do you have any questions, Lauren?
Is it safe to have a baby at mid-20s?
It is up to a person. If they are in good health and choose to continue on with the pregnancy or choose to get pregnant, then I would encourage them to go see a doctor.
Great question, Lauren.
Or even go and talk to a midwife, because then they'll be able to tell them if
they're in a healthy enough place to have a baby. What a great question, Lauren.
But it's definitely a person's choice to have a baby or continue on with the pregnancy.
Okay, so we're gonna move right along now to asking some of the questions that the community members have asked. Now, we all know we have done several videos, Lauren and myself, to talk about condoms and how they are help with safe sex and preventing pregnancy, but we're gonna lean into talking today about birth control. Birth control, it's important that you know, does not protect you from STDs, STIs, or the HIV virus. Only condoms are the best solution for that, and And so we want to encourage people who are having sexual relations or sexual intercourse to continue to wear condoms. Once again, this is about just about safety and reducing STIs and the HIV infection as well. So we have some questions here from the community, and so I'm going to pick the first one. And the question that we have is, how do you track ovulation?
How do you track ovulation? So there's lots of different ways to track ovulation, actually. There's one way that's sort of monitoring your the mucus in your vagina that's on your cervix, which a lot of people might find kind of gross, which is neither here nor there. I would encourage people to find, figure out what's going on with your body. There are wonderful apps, actually. There are apps for...
There's apps now, too.
There are apps to track your ovulation cycle. There's also taking your temperature. So when you're ovulating, your temperature goes up. If you're trying to prevent pregnancy, when you're ovulating, you wouldn't have sex.
Okay.
If you're trying to get pregnant, then you would have sex when you're ovulating. There are different, I have a picture for this.
Yay, another picture.
So this is on a 28-day cycle, and not everybody's on a 28-day cycle. For the people who bleed, some people's cycles are shorter, some people's cycles are longer. It depends, but the medical community has kind of said that 28-day cycle is the cycle that is the most common.
Okay.
So the first day that someone starts bleeding, so the first day of your period is the first day of your cycle. And so here it says that somebody bleeds for 7 days. That's
varies as well based on the individual. Okay.
Yeah, so it could be shorter, it could be longer, it could be lighter, it could be heavier. It depends on the person. If you think that maybe your menstruation cycle or your time is not regulated, or sometimes what people call normal, I would encourage people to go and see a doctor about that. But for the uses of this, we're going to go on a 28 cycle, and we're going to say that someone menstruates or has their time for seven days. Okay. And so for those 7 days, you're bleeding. And in theory, are not fertile. I'm going to talk about that in a bit, but right now we're going to say that you're not fertile for these 7 days. And so first day to the 7th day, you're menstruating. And so from 7th day to the 12th day, sometimes 14th day, so the 12th day of your cycle to the 16th day of your cycle, you would be ovulating. And so you could track this on a calendar, actually, just a calendar on your phone, or one of those old-time desk calendars. You mark the first day of your cycle, and then you can count from the 12th day of your cycle to the 16th day of your cycle. You, in theory, might be ovulating. This is not the same for everyone. Some people might ovulate sooner, some people might ovulate later in their cycle. It just depends. But we'll say that people are ovulating from the 12th day of their cycle to the 16th day of the cycle. So you can very possibly get pregnant on these days.
So that's your most likely time to get is 12 to 15 days after menstruation is when you are scientifically, according to doctors and physicians, that's when you're most commonly going to and can potentially get pregnant.
Yeah, so if you're using a form of birth control called, in the old days they used to call it the rhythm method. If you're using that, if you're using that sort of method for birth control, 1, not 100% effective, but 2, you definitely would not have sex from your 12th day of your cycle to your 16th day of your cycle if you're attempting not to get pregnant.
Okay.
So on day 17, so all the blue parts are when you're not fertile. So in school, I don't know if people remember this from when they were in school, but I remember when I was in school and we were taking health class, they basically said that if you looked at somebody from the opposite sex, you could get pregnant. Do you remember?
You know what? I don't. Do you remember that, Lauren?
No.
No. So, I went to school a long time ago when there was dinosaurs roaming the earth, and so there was a lot of fear that people told us, so that they would prevent teenage pregnancy.
By not looking at one another.
Just don't even.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't associate with the opposite sex until you are of age to be able to do that.
Okay, let's go through just some quick questions.
Okay.
Can you get pregnant from giving a blowjob?
No.
Can you get pregnant from kissing?
No.
Can you get pregnant from hugging?
No.
What about dry sex with your clothes on?
No.
Okay, so now we have some things out of the way.
You cannot get pregnant from a lot of different ways of it showing affection to someone of the opposite sex. If you're choosing to have heterosexual sex, or having sex where there's a penis and a vagina involved, there are lots of different kinds of ways that you can have show your affection for someone and not get pregnant.
Absolutely.
That doesn't actually include inserting a penis into a vagina.
So once again, what we know the most common way and pretty much the only way we can get pregnant is through penis inserting into a vagina and ejaculating inside the vaginal canal. So that's how pregnancy occurs. Now let's just jump right into what are the different ways and different types of birth control. How many different types is there?
There's lots of different types of birth control. The most common that's used in North America is hormonal birth control.
And that's the pill, essentially, right?
So the pill or the patch.
Okay.
The pill is the most common form of birth control, and when used correctly, is quite effective.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot. So the pill is not 100%. So no birth control
is 100%.
Is 100% effective. They're usually around 97 to 99% effective.
Well, those are pretty good. Pretty good numbers. What do you think, Lauren?
Great number.
Bring on.
So, and I would encourage people who are choosing to have penis and vagina sex to use birth control and talk to your doctor about what kind of birth control is best for you, as well as using condoms to avoid, so like you were saying before, birth control, hormonal birth control, so the pill, the patch, the IUD, different other kinds of hormonal birth control, they don't protect anybody from STIs.
STDs.
Yeah, so they don't protect anybody from STIs, and so using hormonal birth control and a condom is always best.
Absolutely.
If you're choosing to have a monogamous relationship, that's also fine. Getting tested
regularly.
a couple times a year is really important. Everybody should do that.
Even if you are in a monogamous relationship, we are conscious of infidelity and cheating, and people who are sometimes in a committed relationship and not being honest with their partners and having sex with somebody else. So we want to encourage people still, if they're in a monogamous relationship, to take care of themselves, protect themselves, and go get checked regularly.
Well, in addition to that, some STIs don't show up right away. So it could, it could not show up maybe one time that you go and get tested and it says it's all clear, and then maybe the next time you go and get tested, it'll show up. And you've been monogamous and all of that, but it's still important to get tested regularly. Absolutely. Even if you are in a monogamous relationship, it's just very important to get tested.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Now I've heard about a needle that you can take to prevent pregnancy. What is that?
Oh, the Depo-Provera shot.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. It's a needle that you would go and see your doctor every 3 months to get. It's a hormonal shot.
Okay.
There are some side effects with it, and sometimes it doesn't agree with people. Sometimes it just, like some birth controls there's not one birth control for everyone.
Yeah.
So some birth controls work really well for people, and some birth controls have side effects that are quite hard on people. So I would definitely talk to your physician about that. What kind of birth control would be best for you? So
Can we give an example of some of the side effects that you might get if you take the needle?
So they're varied. Because it's a hormonal birth control, there you could have a higher risk. Some people get depressed when they're on the depot shot.
Because it's messing with the emotions and the hormones, which are associated with the emotions.
Yeah, well, hormones. I mean, you're taking hormonal birth control to stop the not the production of ovum, but the release. The ability to be able to implant a fertilized egg into your uterine lining. So hormonal birth control can affect people. It can affect their hormones. It can affect their emotions. Some people gain a lot of weight on different kind of birth control. Some people.
I've heard rumors of sore boobs too sometimes during these things.
Yeah, I mean, tender breasts are common for people who have breasts during any point of their cycle, during early pregnancy, when you're on hormonal birth control. Tender breasts are very, very common.
Okay.
If they last longer than, if they last a long time, I would go and see your physician.
Absolutely. Mood swings?
Mood swings are common as well. I mean, again, with the sort of the reproductive cycle of a uterus, there is a lot of hormones that go through one's body. So there are ups and downs to people.
So right now we have the pill, the injection, which is called Depo-Provera, and then the other form of birth control is something you put inside your.
So the IUDs.
The IUDs. So that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about IUDs, right?
You want to talk about?
That's IUDs. I want to know.
IUDs are actually a really common form of birth control as well. It's one of the oldest forms of birth control. So there are two types of IUDs. So they're called intrauterine devices. I'm probably not saying that correctly.
Okay, that's all right.
IUD for short.
IUD for short.
IUDs are a little piece of, so you can get two kinds. So one's a copper piece. So it kind of looks like a T. So it has it kind of looks like this, and then there's a little piece, it looks like a T.
And so does the woman insert that, or the person with the vagina insert that themselves?
Oh, no.
Or is that done by a medical expert?
It would be done by a medical professional, so a nurse, a doctor, would be able to insert an IUD. IUDs are quite common, and they're actually, the copper one doesn't have any hormones, but there's another a hormonal version of the IUD that's quite common, and it's actually, from what I've been reading, is actually starting to be more promoted with physicians.
Yeah.
That it's safer for people. Your cycles might be a bit more regulated. If you don't want to have hormonal birth control in your body, which is understandable, and I think that if you choose not to use hormonal birth control, that's totally fine. You can use a copper IUD.
Can the individual with the vagina feel that inside them?
You can.
Is that going to be discomfortable, or is it they're not going to realize it's there?
So if it's inserted correctly, you won't feel it inside you. There's a little string that kind of hangs from the IUD to through the cervix, and it kind of hangs within the vagina.
So not coming outside the vagina?
No.
Okay.
No. It's not like a tampon. So it
Okay.
just there's a little a little string. Not that you can pull it out. I would never encourage anyone to remove.
Do not pull out your IUD. Go see your doctor and
Yeah.
physician for that.
Yeah, go see a medical professional to have your IUD inserted or removed.
Okay.
There are some side effects with IUDs as well. So the copper one, because it's non-hormonal, it can, make your periods or your cycles a little worse. It could but I would talk to your physician about that. If you can feel it after, and it is quite possible to be able to feel it after.
Yep.
I would encourage people to go and see their physicians again. People are often worried. There's, there is talk about people having their uteruses sort of perforated by an IUD. That's
what is perforated? What does that mean?
It means that the IUD would stick through their uterus, the uterus lining, so it would make a hole in their uterus. That's not very common.
Is it painful when they put the?
It's no more painful than getting a pap smear.
Okay.
You're dilating the cervix, and so that's not very fun. But
it's part of the process.
It's part of the process.
Okay. So now we've talked about the pill, the injection, and the IUDs. Is there any other forms of birth control that we are aware of? What about the good old pull-out technique?
So the pulling out, I would not recommend.
I'm going to not recommend the pulling out technique because there is this thing called pre-cum or pre-ejaculation, and it's just not an effective form of birth control.
But I would even encourage people not to use the pull-out method, not only not to just prevent pregnancy, but also you can still get STIs.
Yes.
So, I would encourage people to use condoms if they're choosing to have sort of heterosexual penis and vagina sex.
Okay, perfect. So now we're going to jump into community questions. And Lauren, this is your favorite part of the show, right?
Yes.
And why is it your favorite part of the show?
Because we get to answer the questions that you guys ask us.
That's right, Lauren. So we're going to get right in there. I'm going to let Denise pick the next one, and she's going to pass this one over to me, and then I'm going to see if I can answer the question.
Okay.
And then Denise will correct me if I'm wrong. What is the question, Denise?
Are there any negative side effects, long or short term, from having a safe abortion?
Is there any negative side effects, short or long term, from having a safe abortion? I have no idea, to be honest with you. Is there any side effects?
Just like with any medical procedure, there can be side effects. But having a safe abortion, being able to have a safe abortion, the risks are much lower. I would even say, again, I'm not a clinician, but having a safe abortion is you're reducing the risks of any short or long-term effects to nil. I think a lot of people people with uteruses who maybe have had an abortion are worried that maybe they can't get pregnant again, and that's not the case at all.
So that's not true either. So if you have an abortion, you can still get pregnant.
Yes.
Now, Lauren, do you have any questions for Denise?
Pregnancy, how long do you think you know when you're pregnant?
So how long do you know if you get pregnant? I think what Lauren's trying to ask is how long before you'll know that you're pregnant?
So most of the time, most people who can get pregnant, they might not notice until they've missed their first menstrual cycle, their first time.
Perfect.
And then so often what you hear is, oh, I'm late. So meaning that their period is late, or they've skipped it,
So that's normally the first symptoms when you miss your period and your period has not come. If you've been sexually active and you miss your period, that could be a sign or symptom, an early sign or symptom that you might be pregnant. So that's a good time to maybe go take a pregnancy test, and you can purchase these at any sort of Shoppers Drug Mart or health-related store.
I would even encourage folks that maybe it's their period's late, or they've missed their period entirely, and it's a long time until they get paid again. Maybe it's the middle of the month, and they're not getting money until the end of the month. I would encourage people to go to a walk-in clinic or a doctor. Under OHIP, doctors can
Provide you with
a pregnancy test.
And I think this is really important to the viewers as well. If you miss your period or it's late, does not mean that you are necessarily pregnant.
No.
And I see a lot of people get really anxious and worked up, and they cause themselves a lot of stress. Just because your pregnancy is late, or just because your period is late does not necessarily mean you're pregnant.
No.
So the only way to determine whether or not you're pregnant is by taking a pregnancy test.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to the next question, and I'm going to read one for Denise. What are some cultural teachings, ceremonies surrounding pregnancy and birth control? Do you know any of those?
So I'm starting to learn a little bit about the ceremonies surrounding pregnancy and birth. I don't know a lot, and I think because there's so many different teachings, because there's so many different nations, that there's not just one or two pregnancy and birth teachings or ceremonies. What I have learned in the work that I do is that many Indigenous communities, in fact, I would say most Indigenous communities, consider being pregnant the active ceremony. That
Hey, I like that.
when you're pregnant, you're in ceremony. That's your time to take care of yourself. And so making sure that you're drinking lots of water and getting lots of rest and eating, the best food that you can.
That's really special. I like that. So traditionally or culturally, a lot of cultures believe that when you get pregnant that you are ceremony, which would make, or actually in ceremony, which would make sense why we don't drink or use drugs, and that we take care of ourselves. So that's a time about healing and a very, very special gift. And I absolutely think that's great. And I'm really looking forward, because we're gonna have another episode later on, hopefully with Stephanie Panguish, the cultural manager here at the Native Canadian Centre of Toronto, to really talk about that culture specific stuff.
The one birth ceremony that I've learned is, I'm sure that Steph's going to talk about it, is placenta teachings and bearing your placenta.
I've heard about this too.
And bathing the baby in a cedar bath when the baby's first, within a couple of days of the baby first being born, having the baby in a cedar bath is really important. Not only because cedar is a traditional medicine for us, one of the 4 sacred medicines, but it's also proven that cedar's there's a lot of vitamin C in cedar. It actually has,
which is good for the baby.
Which is good for everyone. Everyone should have cedar tea or consume cedar of some sort. But it's also very good for the baby, for that first. I would encourage people to do that.
All right, let's jump into another question. I'm gonna let you pick one for me again this time, Denise, and then we'll probably take maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up this episode. Can you take Plan B while on birth control? So Plan B, for those of you who do not know, we didn't talk a little bit. Plan B is if you have unprotected sex with somebody and you think that you may become pregnant, this is a pill that you would take the day after, or I'm not sure how the length works, but they talk about it mostly on the day after, that could prevent the pregnancy. How does Plan B work?
So taking Plan B, if you're having unprotected penis and vagina sex, you would take it as soon as possible. So it's most effective, sort of within the 24-hour mark.
Now this one has serious side effects, though, right?
It does have side effects. So it's a very big dose of hormones that's going into your body. So the earlier you take it, the more the better it is. But you can take it, I believe, up to 48 to 72 hours.
So within 2 to 3 days max, right?
Yeah, I would. If you're taking birth control effectively, and so if you're taking it every day, and
then there's no reason for Plan B.
There's no real reason for Plan B.
So if you're taking the pill and you're already on, chances are you don't need to take Plan B.
So if you're on any sort of birth control,
that's a double negative. Don't do that.
I mean, I would talk to a physician, but I would not see a reason why you would take Plan B unless maybe you've missed a week of your pills, or your IUD has fallen out, or maybe you've missed a week of your patch. Like if something went wrong with your birth control, then
maybe.
Talking to a doctor.
Talking to a doctor is always one of the best ways to go about things. If you're not sure, always just reach out, and go speak to your doctor. Say this is what happened. They're the medical experts. They're the ones with the great answers.
And in Toronto, there's a lot of really great clinics in the city that are covered under OHIP. So there's the Hassle-Free Clinic, and there's Planned Parenthood, and there's Anishinaabe Health for Indigenous folks.
Absolutely.
We can go and talk to a nurse, and they're really helpful and wonderful, and I would encourage people to go and see a physician.
All right, let's jump into our next community question, which is, what are the early signs of infertility? And first off, what is infertility?
So infertility would mean the inability to be able to get pregnant. The earliest signs might be that your cycles, your time is not
regulated
or
even happening.
Yeah. So if your cycles are longer than they're quite far apart, or maybe you don't have them once a month-ish, or they seem really heavy, or you're having a lot of symptoms like premenstrual symptoms, I would go and see a doctor. I would go in and chat with a physician about that, because they can do different tests to see what kind of maybe something's wrong.
Yeah.
Often infertility, I think people are very scared of being infertile, and so sometimes
they get the anxiety, gets a crazy thing, and I'm not able to have a baby, and so the best way to find out is to speak to a doctor. Again, doctors can do tests to determine this type of stuff.
So there's no real, I could again, I'm not a physician, but there's not something on your body that's gonna tell you that you're infertile. I would encourage folks who menstruate to track their periods. There's apps on your phone. You can get an app to track your period. You can use a big calendar and write down when your period starts and all those things, and track it for a few months, and then go and see a physician and say, this is kind of what my period does. This is how my cycles go. I'm worried about maybe I'm infertile. I've been trying to get pregnant. Most people try for, most physicians will encourage people to try for at least a year. Getting pregnant, if they're trying to get pregnant, before.
And just so people know, I have had personal friends of mine who were not able to get pregnant for 1, 2, 3 years, and then the miracle happens at birth. One of my good friends had that experience where him and his wife were trying for a really long time, and the minute they stopped trying, voila, there's that little baby in the belly. So we're going to move on to one more question. So I'll let you pick one more there. And then...
Okay, what is it?
What does it say?
Can you get pregnant if you have sex on your period?
So can you get pregnant if you are on your period? I'm going to answer this one. It is unlikely, but it is possible to get pregnant on your period. It is possible to get pregnant anytime throughout your menstrual cycle and after your menstrual cycle. So you can get pregnant at any time. There is no sure answer. Is that right or wrong?
It's sort of true. So back to my beautiful
ovulation diagram.
My wheel of ovulation. Spin, spin, spin. So depending on a person, so every person's different. And so on here, on a perfect cycle, your ovulation would be 12 to 16 days. So these blue days actually mean that there's no egg. There's no egg anywhere near anywhere that a sperm could get to. So the chances of you getting pregnant during the blue times is basically nil.
It's basically nil, but it is possible.
The only time you can get pregnant is if an ovum or an egg has been released from your ovary floated and has, and a sperm has connected to it. Sperms do not flow up to your ovaries and connect. That's not possible. So it's only when your ovum releases an egg and it, sort of floats down the fallopian tube, and the sperm is there, and it's actually you're actually more likely not to get pregnant than are. So there's a very small window in which most people can get pregnant because the egg has been released. And so but you can ovulate. So not everybody ovulates from 12 to 16 days. You can ovulate from 20 to 24 days.
We don't know when the egg is going to be where we're not.
So you can track it.
On an app.
You can track it on your app. You can track it through your cervical mucus, which sounds really gross, but I promise it's not gross. Everybody should be familiar with how your
part of the health
work.
body.
You should be aware of your cervical mucuses. So some people can ovulate or can be fertile during their menstrual cycle. Some people, not everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage everyone, if you're choosing to have, penis and vagina sex, to use some sort of birth control.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to thank everybody. Lauren Laval, do you want to thank Denise for us?
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Lauren, for being here.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks, Eddie.
And so I want to wrap up this episode. Now, there was a lot of questions from the community. I'm going to do my best to actually do a post with the answers to the questions. Obviously, people know this is not the real Lauren Laval. Lauren is actually in Japan today, and just because the spirit of the Sunday Night Indigenous Sex and Love show, she was right here from the grassroots, and she will be back from Japan very, very shortly. I want to thank Troy Obi for being such a great sport and doing the voiceover for her. We miss you, Lauren. We can't wait to shoot the next episode with you. So take care, everyone. Hope you have a great weekend. Play safe, and make sure you have a great weekend.